week, as part of Careers Week, I'll be speaking to alumni from a range of different courses and careers to talk about their career paths. We'll also be looking at topics such as resilience, workplace wellbeing, and adapting to new ways of working. Today, I'm joined by MBBS alumna Nicoletta Fossati, who started out as a consultant anaesthetist at St George's Hospital in 2004, following 10 years in the equivalent role in her native Italy. She's spoken in the past about resilience and disability as part of secondary school initiatives and also a podcast for King's College London. So thank you very much for speaking to me today, Nicoletta.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. And could you start just by telling us a bit about your role, please? Just telling us a bit about yourself.
Yes, my role, as you mentioned, is a consultant anaesthetist at St George's. I'm a reader in clinical education anesthesia at St George's University, and clearly we've been very busy in recent times. There's probably been a rekindling of interest about the anesthetic specialty, with the importance, obviously, the emphasis on all the airway management, intubations, breathing management, and all the COVID cases that would go to ITU. So yes, we've been kept very busy.
And how has your role changed in the last year, and what's helped you adapt to those changes?
I don't know if it's changed. I mean, it's probably more the location, if you like, because as I just said, interestingly, it's almost as if for some kind of unfortunate combination of events, the anaesthetist role has come more to the fore. I would never have wished for that to be the case, because clearly that was because of the pandemic and the dramatic need for airway management and, ability to intubate and put a patient on a ventilator, patient with very severe respiratory failure. So in terms of the role in itself, it hasn't much changed, but clearly we have been helping ITU much more. So we would organize ourselves in groups of support. So we would get several calls, I'm afraid, especially during the surge, for intubation, cannulation of patients. Of course, we've all heard about proning and deproning teams, the importance of, changing position during mechanical ventilation with COVID, respiratory failure. So we've been part of these big teams. So that's probably the main change to my clinical role.
And it's probably been quite a challenging year for a lot of our alumni and staff and students. So what helps you stay positive and strike a good work-life balance?
I mean, certainly, if there was one positive thing that COVID almost forced us into, was the fact that we had to embrace technology. So we had to start having all these meetings online, teaching online. So this certainly has helped, and has helped the sense of connection with other people. How do I stay positive? Well, I certainly can't be a lecturer in work-life balance, because I myself struggle to keep a healthy one, as it's always very much easier said than done, I think. But I also find, I have to say, after this almost year since COVID started in the UK, I have to say the usual things seem to work. So stay connected with other people, and remind yourself about the things that are good in your life. Try to avoid tunnel vision, which obviously helps if you try to stay connected to other people, because it opens up to other perspectives. All these things, which sound like a bit trite perhaps, but in fact they're all very helpful, and they do make a difference. I was lucky in the unfortunate situation, of course, that I, like I just said, was being deployed pretty much in a similar role. So I didn't feel a lot of adjustment was required on my part. But certainly at a psychological level, seeing all the very sick patients in a very high proportion, something that switching off at the end of the day, making sure that I look after myself for the basics, good hydration, healthy eating, good sleep, which on occasion has been difficult. Again, connecting with others and celebrating the successes and the good things, perhaps even little good things at the end of the day, and also checking out on colleagues. All those things make for more sense, more meaning, and keep me grounded at a very difficult time.
Thanks very much. I think that'll be good advice for anyone, but particularly for those new graduates who are going into their first role in healthcare. And I just wanted to touch on that because there might be some students wanting to go into a similar line of work. Have you got any advice for those students who would like to follow a similar career path to yourself?
Well, first of all, bearing the unfortunate COVID situation in mind, I think it just helps making more evident what the challenges are if you want to embrace a career in anesthesia or in the acute medical specialties. So I would suggest, first of all, to check that it is actually what it makes you tick. And I'd like to share, to make my point, something about my personal history. I was utterly convinced when I was in university, first year, second year, that I wanted to be a surgeon, no less. So I was absolutely, utterly motivated. I said, yes, I'm going to be a great surgeon one day. So I joined a surgical attachment, which I sort of found my way to. And the surgeons, by way of a reward, they sent me to the US, to Chicago, where they were sending their surgeons in preparation for the liver transplantation program. And of course, as a medical student, I spent a lot of time behind the drapes, on the anesthetist side of the drapes, of course. And that way, I got to realize the importance of that physician's role, because yes, an anesthetist is an acute physician who works in the operating room environment. And as we say these days, perioperative medicine. And of course, this kind of role grew on me. And well, the rest is history. Clearly, I got back and I had changed my mind about what I wanted to do. So my first suggestion is try to get first-hand experience. I know it could be limited these days, you know, the way it's designed, but try to do that just to check that your idea of the specialty is what you have in mind, because it may be different. Just like I thought that surgery was one thing, when I saw surgery in real life and compared it to anesthesia, they looked very different to me. And as I wanted to be a physician at the end of the day, rather than a surgeon, that was my main discovery. Then I embraced anesthesia. Look at the negative aspect of the specialty. Don't be fooled by the spectacularization we see in TV series and all that, because yes, there are the unsociable hours, difficult decisions if you want to have a personal life or family life, whatever works for you, having an understanding partner, a person who's on the same page with you. It doesn't have to be another doctor. My husband's completely different kind of trade, but certainly there has to be a shared understanding, a shared set of values, and of course your partner has to be able to share the burden pretty equally, and at times even more, because those things will shift in life. Stay curious, keep learning. It's constant learning. New things come up all the time, so you've got to be constantly up to date. And finally, I would say try to develop a couple of specific interests for yourselves, because those are the things that will keep you going, will make you slightly different from the other colleagues, and potentially be a good selling point for a job. And also the things that could keep you going once you're a seasoned anaesthetist, and all the things that probably excite you at the mere thinking of those at the moment will at some point become chores. So you need to have something that you continue to develop, probably a couple of streams in your career, and those things will make you a satisfied anaesthetist and happy anaesthetist, which is always a good thing.
Great advice, thank you. I wanted to carry on by talking a bit about some of the topics you've spoken about in the past. So firstly, you've had some experience of adjusting to living with a disability. Do you have any advice for someone adjusting to a major life change?
Yeah, so first of all, very, very briefly, it's probably in the profile. In 2005, I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which clearly was a life-changing event. Luckily, I was operated on, so now I'm cured. I'm okay. In terms, it's not gonna repeat again. But I have a physical disability, so clearly the adjustment that was required at the time. I was the main breadwinner. There were little children involved, and that was a very difficult time. So I'm not sure if I can be a teacher of any kind, but drawing from my own experience, I have to say that the first thing about adapting to these big things is accepting change, accepting that change is part of human life, it's part of the human condition. And that the human spirit, in fact, has resources we can tap into when it actually is needed. I mean, goodness forbid that we have to tap into those resources. I only found those resources in me when I needed them. I've always, whenever I get asked about this, I always mention that had I been asked before that event, before becoming disabled, this very question, what would you do? How would you react? I would have very simply said, well, that would be it, wouldn't it? As in, that would be end of my career, the end of a dream. I would have just to go on and do something else. So I've only found a different attitude and some resources in myself when they were needed. That's why I'm saying, goodness forbid that we have to tap into those energies. But I think that the human creature has so much to tap into, so much to give. And I hope you never need those resources, but they are inside yourself, ready to be used should the time come for them to be used.
Thank you. And just following on from that, you've also spoken quite a lot about resilience in the past. Do you have any resilience tips for our students or recent graduates?
I've been thinking about this for a long time in my life, because whenever I've been speaking about resilience, obviously this question pops up all the time, and it's a very meaningful question to ask. So I have been forced to try and distill down some bullet points, if you like, but that also involved a lot of looking inside myself and rethinking my story, what happened to me, making sense of all that. So to try and be as short as I can be, to me, it all boils down, when it comes to resilience and becoming a resilient person, the acceptance of our own inherent imperfection as human beings. I personally find that unless we accept that on a very deep level, not just on a rational level, but on a very existential level, it's very difficult to have true resilience. Because when something happens to us and we fall short, or perhaps we fall short thinking about our own projection of what we thought we would be or could be, or perhaps what we think others think of us. So it's all linked one way or another to self-esteem, self-worth, and what constitutes the root of our self-worth. I know it sounds very sort of hoity-toity, but it isn't. So the bottom line is, once we truly embrace and we consider ourselves free to embrace our imperfection, first of all, this is very liberating. When I became disabled, for me, in the process, because obviously all these things, resilience doesn't happen overnight. It's something you have to work at and build day to day. But I was thinking, well, okay, so my perfect self-image is now shattered. As reduced to smithereens, because it's very evident I have a physical disability and I can't start thinking what people with a non-visible disability may go through, in this process. When people look at them and they're like, I'm not sure, what's wrong with you? Why are you behaving like that? So it can be very difficult for people whose disability is invisible to others. But mine is. So for me, for my experience, everybody can see, because I walk with a limp. I use a stick when I'm outdoors to negotiate curbs, slopes, slippery ground. So it's clear that there's something wrong with me. Let me use this wrong, with a kind of quotation marks. So I have to say, okay, so I don't have to put up this kind of pretense that I'm a perfect human being, because I'm not. Hi-ho. And no one is, of course. That's the bottom line. No one's a perfect human being, because imperfection is inherent with our condition. So I started calling myself a reformed perfectionist. Occasionally I have relapses, but I try to keep on top of those. And obviously my family, they keep me in check on that. And so once you free yourself up from the slavery of perfection and you accept your imperfection, you are free to start building up yourself again. And by this, however, by accepting imperfection, of course, I know that we as doctors are a pretty picky bunch, and we all have very high expectations on ourselves and, how we should be, because of course we want to care for other people. So we have this calling in ourselves. So I'm not belittling that. I'm just saying that once we've accepted that, we don't rely on a single performance to judge ourselves for our self-worth. We are ready to learn, because we accept that we are constantly learning. And we know as doctors that it gets told to us all the time that it's about lifelong learning. If you want to be a doctor or any other person who works in the healthcare, the myriad healthcare subjects that get taught at St. George's, you think about a life in service of other human beings. So you've got to learn throughout your life. And you start a kind of journey. And some things will be particularly good, and you have to remind yourself every day about the good things. But you also have to look properly but kindly at the things that you could make better. So again, this is not about being indulgent on myself when I think about what it means to me now to accept my imperfections. I know that I have to work very hard on some imperfections, but I'm like, this is the journey of a lifetime. And the other good things, the things I know I can do well, are the things that I can put in service of other people. So I also think, to conclude, that it takes courage to be imperfect. And I would say, learn the courage to be imperfect, embrace your imperfections, because you will uncannily become the extraordinary human being that you're already on track becoming. So that's the kind of tip I would give in terms of resilience.
Well, thank you very much. Some great advice today, and it's been really interesting hearing a bit more about your background and how you've come to be in the career that you're in at the moment. So thanks again for joining us today. It's been really useful, I'm sure, for lots of our students and graduates.
And thank you once more for giving me this opportunity. I remain available if need be to be contacted in order to continue this conversation in the future. Thank you very much, Heather.